This book was generated using Speakter's AI voices. You can create human-like voiceovers in over 50 languages.
In London, on the 2nd day of October 1872, a peculiar gentleman named Phileas Fogg began his day. He was a wealthy and solitary Englishman, known for his eccentric nature and precise daily routine. The crisp autumn air nipped at Fogg's cheeks as he stepped out onto the bustling streets of London. Leaves crunched beneath his polished shoes, their russet hues a stark contrast to the gray cobblestones. The city pulsed with life around him, a cacophony of horse hooves, carriage wheels, and animated chatter. Yet Fogg moved through it all with the steady, unwavering pace of a metronome. His pocket watch, a gleaming testament to precision, ticked away in his waistcoat pocket. Each second that passed was a reassuring reminder of the order he prized above all else. The world might spin in chaos, but Phileas Fogg's life was a finely tuned machine, each cog and wheel turning with perfect synchronicity. As afternoon shadows lengthened, Fogg's steps led him to the imposing facade of the Reform Club. The building stood like a sentinel of tradition, its windows reflecting the fading sunlight. Inside, the familiar scent of leather and tobacco embraced him, a comforting cocoon of gentlemanly pursuits. The reading room, usually a haven of quiet contemplation, crackled with an unusual energy. Fogg's eyebrow arched ever so slightly as he caught snippets of animated conversation. A recent newspaper article had set the room ablaze with speculation and debate. It claimed that recent advancements, including a new railway in India, had made it possible to circumnavigate the globe in a mere 80 days. The very notion seemed to defy the laws of nature, and yet, Fogg felt a stirring in his chest, a feeling so foreign he almost didn't recognize it. Excitement, challenge. The world suddenly seemed both smaller and infinitely more intriguing. "Gentlemen," Fogg's voice cut through the din, calm and measured as always, but with an undercurrent of something new. "I assert that I can complete this journey in that time." The room fell silent, as if someone had suddenly muted the world. Then, like a dam bursting, voices erupted in a torrent of disbelief and challenge. Stewart, Fallentin, Sullivan, Flanagan, and Ralph, pillars of the club, hurled questions and doubts at Fogg like stones against a fortress wall. But Fogg stood unmoved, his resolve as solid as the foundations of London itself. His eyes, usually cool and distant, now gleamed with quiet determination. "I propose a wager," he said, his words dropping into the sudden hush like pebbles into a still pond. "Half my fortune, $20,000, that I can circle the globe in 80 days or less." The terms were set with military precision. Fogg would need to return to this very spot in the Reform Club by 8:45 p.m. on Saturday, December 21st, 1872. The ornate clock on the mantelpiece seemed to tick louder, as if counting down to this momentous deadline. Without hesitation, Fogg accepted the wager. His fellow club members exchanged glances of astonishment, their eyes wide with a mixture of admiration and concern. It was as if they had witnessed a man calmly agreeing to walk across the Atlantic Ocean. As the reality of his commitment sank in, Fogg's mind whirred into action. He began to calculate routes and timetables with the precision of a master chess player, plotting moves in advance. The world became a giant board, and Fogg was determined to conquer it within the allotted time. The air in the club grew thick with anticipation. It was as if the very walls were leaning in, eager to witness the unfolding of this extraordinary tale. The other members watched, a mixture of awe and skepticism etched on their faces, as Fogg calmly prepared for his departure. Little did they know that this wager would set in motion an adventure that would test not just Fogg's meticulous planning, but his very understanding of the world and his place in it. As the gravity of his decision settled over him like a mantle, Fogg's mind raced ahead, mapping out the incredible odyssey that lay before him. With a final nod to his fellow club members, Fogg turned on his heel and strode purposefully towards the exit. The grand doors of the Reform Club swung open, revealing the bustling London street beyond. It was as if the world itself was beckoning him forward, daring him to step out of his carefully ordered existence and into the unknown. Fogg paused for just a moment on the threshold, his hand instinctively reaching for his pocket watch. The familiar weight of it grounded him, even as he prepared to launch himself into an adventure beyond his wildest imaginings. With a deep breath, he stepped out into the fading light of the October evening, leaving behind the safety of his routine and venturing into a world of endless possibilities. As night fell over London, Phileas Fogg entered his residence with purposeful strides. His face, a mask of calm determination, betrayed nothing of the grand adventure that lay ahead. But behind that composed exterior, a storm was brewing. What challenges awaited him beyond the familiar streets of London? And more importantly, would the precisely ordered world he had built for himself survive the chaos of this global adventure? Phileas Fogg entered his London residence with purposeful strides. His face, a mask of calm determination, betrayed nothing of the grand adventure that lay ahead. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 5 times, its resonant tones echoing through the quiet house. Fogg's polished shoes clicked against the hardwood floor as he made his way to the study, where his valet, James Forster, stood at attention. "Forster," Fogg announced, his voice steady and measured, "we leave for a journey around the world in precisely 80 minutes. Pack immediately." The news hit Forster like a thunderbolt. His eyes widened, mouth agape as he stammered, "But, sir, leave on such short notice? Impossible." The valet's protests were met with Fogg's unwavering gaze, as immovable as a mountain. "Your services are no longer required, Forster," Fogg stated, his tone brooking no argument. "You may go." As Forster stumbled out, still reeling from the sudden dismissal, Fogg set about finding a replacement with the same methodical precision he applied to every aspect of his life. Fortune smiled upon him in the form of Jean Passepartout, a Frenchman whose weathered face spoke of a life filled with adventure, now seeking the tranquility of a quiet existence. Passepartout's eyes sparkled with hope as he accepted the position, blissfully unaware of the whirlwind journey that lay ahead. At last, he thought, running a hand through his tousled hair, a chance to settle into a predictable routine. Little did he know that fate had other plans in store. As evening descended upon London, painting the sky in hues of amber and violet, Fogg and Passepartout boarded a train bound for Dover. The platform bustled with activity, the air thick with the scent of coal smoke and the hiss of steam. Their only luggage, a modest carpet bag containing a few necessities and a small fortune of $20,000 in crisp banknotes. The train lurched forward, wheels clattering against the tracks. Passepartout gazed out the window, watching as the city lights faded into the gathering darkness. His heart raced with a mixture of excitement and trepidation, sensing that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't yet imagine. Meanwhile, across town, a different drama was unfolding. The recent theft of $55,000 from the Bank of England had set the city abuzz with speculation. Detective Fix, a shrewd Scotland Yard inspector with a nose for trouble, found his attention drawn to Fogg's sudden departure. Fix's mind raced as he compared Fogg's description to that of the elusive bank robber. The similarities were too striking to ignore. With the tenacity of a bloodhound on a scent, Fix made a snap decision. He would follow Fogg, his instincts screaming that this well-heeled gentleman was more than he appeared. Pulling strings and calling in favors, Fix managed to secure a warrant for Fogg's arrest. The paper felt heavy in his pocket, a weight of responsibility and anticipation. As Fogg and Passepartout boarded the Mongolia, a steamer bound for Suez, Fix slipped aboard like a shadow, his heart pounding with the thrill of the chase. The vast expanse of the Mediterranean stretched before them, a canvas of endless possibilities. The salty sea air whipped across the deck, carrying with it the promise of adventure. Passepartout, still oblivious to the true nature of their journey, found himself befriended by the cunning detective. Fix's friendly demeanor masked his true intentions as he probed for information, each casual conversation a carefully laid trap. "So, Monsieur Passepartout," Fix said one evening, leaning against the ship's railing, "what business takes your master on such a hasty journey?" Passepartout shrugged, his face a picture of innocence. "I know not, Monsieur Fix. I only know we travel, and travel far." As the Mongolia cut through the waves, leaving a frothy wake in its path, Fix's conviction grew stronger with each passing day. In his mind, Fogg's guilt was as certain as the sun rising each morning. The detective's eyes gleamed with anticipation, imagining the moment he would clap irons on the wrists of his unsuspecting quarry. Days blended into nights as the ship sailed on. Fogg remained an enigma, spending most of his time in his cabin or engaged in endless games of whist. Passepartout, on the other hand, reveled in the new experiences, his exuberance a stark contrast to his master's stoic demeanor. As they approached the Suez Canal, the air grew heavy with heat and anticipation. The narrow waterway stretched before them, like a ribbon of blue cutting through the golden desert sands. Passepartout marveled at the engineering feat, while Fogg merely consulted his pocket watch, his mind already racing ahead to their next destination. Little did any of them know that this voyage was merely the opening act of an epic adventure. As they sailed towards the exotic shores of India, the stage was set for a thrilling game of cat and mouse that would span continents, test loyalties, and challenge the very notion of what was possible in this age of wonder and discovery. The Mongolia docked in Bombay on October 20th, 2 days ahead of schedule. As Fogg and Passepartout prepared to disembark, Fix watched from the shadows, his warrant burning a hole in his pocket. The bustling port city lay before them, a maze of opportunity and danger. What challenges awaited them in this strange land? And would Fix finally make his move, or would Fogg slip through his fingers once again? Phileas Fogg and Passepartout set foot in Bombay on October 20th. Their journey was progressing smoothly, putting them 2 days ahead of schedule. The ever-punctual Fogg allowed himself a slight nod of satisfaction, his usually impassive face betraying a hint of approval. The port city of Bombay engulfed them in a whirlwind of sensations. The air was thick with the pungent aroma of spices, mingling with the salty tang of the Arabian Sea. A cacophony of sounds assaulted their ears. The shouts of street vendors, the rumble of cartwheels on cobblestone, and the distant blare of ship horns. Colors danced before their eyes, vibrant saris, sun-bleached buildings, and the glinting waters of the harbor. As they made their way to the train station, Passepartout's eyes darted from one spectacle to another, drinking in the exotic sights. Fogg, in contrast, moved with purposeful strides, his mind already racing ahead to the next leg of their journey. The train chugged to life, carrying them across the vast expanse of India. Outside the window, the landscape transformed like a living canvas. Lush green fields stretched as far as the eye could see, gradually giving way to arid plains dotted with ancient temples. These weathered structures stood silent and proud, guardians of centuries of history. Cities flashed by in a blur of movement and color, each a unique tapestry of life and culture. Their well-laid plans hit an unexpected snag in Allahabad. The railway, they discovered to their dismay, was incomplete. Fogg's face remained a mask of calm, but his mind whirred with calculations. With characteristic decisiveness, he purchased an elephant, a magnificent beast named Kiuni, and hired Sir Francis Cromarty as a guide to navigate the dense jungle that lay ahead. The jungle was a world unto itself, alive with mystery and danger. Thick vines hung like curtains from towering trees, their leaves creating a canopy that filtered the sunlight into dappled patterns on the forest floor. Exotic birds called out in a wild symphony, their cries echoing through the green labyrinth. As they pushed deeper into the heart of this primeval world, the air grew heavy with moisture and the earthy scent of damp soil. It was during this leg of their journey that they encountered a sight that would alter the course of their adventure. A sooty procession wound its way through the undergrowth, a somber parade heading towards an unthinkable conclusion. At its heart was Aouda, a young Parsi woman destined for sacrifice on her deceased husband's funeral pyre. The sight stirred something in Fogg's usually unflappable demeanor. His eyes, normally cool and calculating, flashed with an unfamiliar fire. In that moment, he made a decision that would deviate from his meticulously planned journey, but would align perfectly with his moral compass. "We must save her," Fogg declared, his voice low but firm. The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their implications. A plan quickly took shape. Passepartout, ever loyal and surprisingly resourceful, volunteered for the most dangerous part. Disguised as the deceased Raja's body, he would infiltrate the ceremony. The tension was palpable as they waited for the right moment, each second stretching into an eternity. When the time came, Passepartout sprang into action with the agility of a circus performer. In a whirlwind of motion, he snatched Aouda from the pyre's deadly embrace. The young woman's eyes widened in shock and relief as she found herself suddenly free from her terrible fate. But their ordeal was far from over. Angry priests, their faces contorted with rage, gave chase. The jungle, once a challenging obstacle, now became their ally as they fled through its tangled depths. Hearts pounding, breath coming in ragged gasps, they pushed on, the sounds of pursuit never far behind. Finally, they broke free from the jungle's grasp, the threat receding behind them. Aouda, still trembling from the ordeal, looked at her rescuers with gratitude shining in her eyes. With nowhere else to go and her life irrevocably changed, she joined their unlikely party. As they raced to catch the train to Calcutta, Fogg calmly pulled out his notebook. With the same precision he applied to every aspect of his journey, he calculated the time lost in this unexpected detour. Yet as he glanced at Aouda's relieved face, a hint of a smile played at the corners of his mouth. This noble act had added an unexpected emotional element to his precisely planned journey, one that even he couldn't have anticipated. The group boarded the train to Calcutta, their hearts still racing from their narrow escape. As the landscape rushed by outside the window, Fogg's mind was already leaping ahead to their next destination. But as night fell and the rhythmic clacking of the train wheels lulled them into an uneasy sleep, none of them could have predicted the challenges that awaited them at their next port of call. In the distance, the lights of Calcutta began to twinkle like stars on the horizon. The steamship Bengal was approaching the bustling port, its decks crowded with passengers eager to disembark. But for Phileas Fogg and his companions, would this next stop be a stepping stone on their journey around the world? Or would it be the place where their grand adventure came to an unexpected end? The steamship Bengal glided into Calcutta's bustling port on October 25th. Its passengers, eager to disembark after their long journey, crowded the decks, their eyes fixed on the vibrant city that sprawled before them. Among the throng stood Phileas Fogg, his face a mask of calm amid the excitement. Beside him, Passepartout fidgeted with anticipation, while Aouda's dark eyes sparkled with curiosity. The air was thick with the pungent aroma of spices and the briny scent of the sea, a heady mixture that seemed to embody the essence of their adventure. As they stepped onto the crowded pier, the cacophony of the harbor engulfed them. Merchants hawked their wares in a dozen languages, seagulls screeched overhead, and the creaking of ship timbers provided a constant backdrop. Suddenly, a commotion erupted nearby, cutting through the din like a knife. "Those are the men! Arrest them!" The sharp voice belonged to Detective Fix, his face flushed with triumph as he emerged from the crowd, flanked by local authorities. Fogg's usually impassive face flickered with surprise, a rare crack in his composed demeanor. Passepartout's eyes widened in shock as the realization dawned on him. Their journey was about to take an unexpected turn. In a whirlwind of confusion, Fogg and Passepartout found themselves surrounded, their protests drowned out by the clamor of the docks. The charge, it seemed, stemmed from an incident in Bombay where Passepartout had unknowingly entered a sacred temple wearing shoes, a grave violation of local customs. The trio was whisked away through the labyrinthine streets of Calcutta, a riot of color and chaos that stood in stark contrast to the orderly progress of their journey thus far. Rickshaws darted between lumbering ox carts, while sari-clad women balanced baskets on their heads with impossible grace. The scent of sizzling street food mingled with the earthy smell of incense, creating an intoxicating perfume that seemed to embody the spirit of India. They arrived at the courthouse, a grand colonial building that loomed over them like an ominous harbinger of delays to come. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with murmurs, the air heavy with tension and the musty scent of old books. Judge Obadiah, a stern-faced man with bushy eyebrows that seemed to have a life of their own, peered down at them from his elevated bench. As the charges were read aloud, each word seemed to tick away precious minutes from Fogg's carefully planned schedule. Passepartout's face was a picture of remorse, while Aouda watched with concern, her delicate hands clasped tightly in her lap. 8 days in prison and a fine, Judge Obadiah declared, his gavel striking with finality. Fogg, ever the picture of composure, barely flinched at the sentence. His mind raced, calculating the impact on his wager, while outwardly he remained as unruffled as a pond on a windless day. With characteristic resourcefulness, he offered to pay bail for himself and Passepartout, his voice steady and determined. "I propose to furnish bail," Fogg stated, his tone brooking no argument. "Name your price." Judge Obadiah, taken aback by Fogg's boldness, set the bail at $1,000 each. Without hesitation, Fogg produced the sum, the stack of banknotes a testament to his preparedness for any eventuality. Once released, Fogg wasted no time. Like a general marshaling his troops, he led his small party through the teeming streets of Calcutta, their destination clear in his mind. The Rangoon, a steamer bound for Hong Kong, became their beacon of hope, a chance to reclaim lost time. As they boarded the ship, the salt-laden breeze carried whispers of new adventures. Fix lurked in the shadows, his frustration at being unable to detain Fogg in British India palpable. With gritted teeth, he too booked passage on the Rangoon, his determination to apprehend Fogg burning brighter than ever. The voyage began, the ship cutting through the waves like a knife through butter. Fogg stood at the rail, his gaze fixed on the horizon, the setting sun painting the sky in a breathtaking array of oranges and purples. His thoughts drifted to Aouda, her presence a constant that had become as familiar as his pocket watch. "My dear Aouda," Fogg began, his voice softer than usual, "I understand you have an uncle in Hong Kong. Rest assured I will see to it that you are safely delivered into his care." Aouda's eyes, deep pools of gratitude, met Fogg's. A silent understanding passed between them, a bond forged through shared adventures and mutual respect. Meanwhile, Passepartout, ever vigilant, couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Fix's constant presence, like a shadow they couldn't outrun, gnawed at him. The Frenchman's instincts, honed by years of diverse experiences, screamed that the detective was more than he appeared to be. As the Rangoon sailed on, cutting through the vast expanse of the ocean, the tension aboard the ship rose like the tide. Fix paced the decks like a caged tiger, his eyes constantly seeking out Fogg, searching for any opportunity to delay the implacable Englishman. The race against time continued, each nautical mile bringing them closer to Hong Kong and the next leg of their extraordinary journey. As night fell, the sea grew restless, the waves crashing against the hull with increasing force. The ship began to pitch and roll, its timbers groaning in protest against the turbulent waters. Passengers clung to railings and fixed objects, their faces pale with fear as the storm intensified. Fogg, however, remained steadfast, his determination unwavering even as the elements seemed to conspire against him. As the Rangoon battled against the raging sea, one question hung in the air. Would they reach Hong Kong on time, or would nature itself prove to be Phileas Fogg's greatest adversary? The Rangoon finally docked in Hong Kong on November 6th. Its journey had been slightly delayed by turbulent seas, testing the resolve of even the most seasoned travelers. As passengers disembarked, a collective sigh of relief rippled through the crowd. The solid ground beneath their feet felt like a blessing after days of rolling waves. The air was thick with the scent of salt and spices, a heady mixture that spoke of exotic lands and untold adventures. Phileas Fogg, ever the picture of composure, strode down the gangplank with Aouda by his side. His face remained impassive, but his mind raced, calculating the precious hours lost to the temperamental ocean. The bustling port engulfed them, a cacophony of shouts from dock workers mingling with the clanging of ship bells and the creaking of wooden planks. Aouda's eyes darted nervously around the unfamiliar surroundings, her hand unconsciously tightening on Fogg's arm. The news of her uncle Jajia's relocation to Holland hit her like a physical blow, leaving her adrift in a sea of strangers. Fogg turned to her, his stoic demeanor softening for a moment. "My dear Aouda," he said, his voice gentle yet resolute, "I would be honored to escort you to Europe. Your safety and comfort are paramount." Gratitude shone in Aouda's eyes, a silent acknowledgement of Fogg's unwavering chivalry. With this matter settled, Fogg dispatched Passepartout to secure passage on the Carnatic, set to depart for Yokohama that very evening. As Passepartout scurried off, Detective Fix lurked in the shadows, his mind churning with schemes. The detective's eyes glinted with malice as he approached the unsuspecting valet. A friendly smile plastered on his face that didn't quite reach his eyes. "My good man," Fix called out, his voice dripping with false camaraderie. "Surely you have a moment to wet your whistle before your errand." Passepartout, ever amiable, allowed himself to be led to a nearby tavern. The warm, smoky interior enveloped them, the air heavy with the scent of tobacco and cheap liquor. Fix ordered drinks, his nimble fingers slipping a potent opium concoction into Passepartout's glass when he wasn't looking. As the drug took hold, Passepartout's world began to spin. Colors blurred like wet paint, sounds muffled as if underwater, and time seemed to stretch like taffy. When he finally awoke, groggy and disoriented, the horrible realization dawned on him. He had missed the Carnatic's departure. Meanwhile, unaware of their valet's predicament, Fogg and Aouda boarded the Carnatic. The ship's whistle pierced the night air, a mournful sound that seemed to echo Passepartout's anguish as he stumbled through the streets, desperate for a solution. Fortune smiled upon the hapless valet in the form of the Tankadere, a sturdy pilot boat bound for Shanghai. Passepartout, his usual cheerfulness dampened by guilt and worry, secured passage, praying he could somehow reunite with his master. In Shanghai, Passepartout's resourcefulness shone through. He joined the crew of the General Grant, a ship sailing for Yokohama, offering his skills as an acrobat in exchange for passage. As he practiced his routines on deck, the salt spray stinging his eyes, Passepartout's determination burned brighter than ever. Fogg and Aouda arrived in Yokohama, the absence of their loyal companion weighing heavily upon them. The bustling Japanese port, with its blend of traditional architecture and modern influences, would have fascinated Passepartout. His silence was a palpable void, like a missing heartbeat in their small party. In an attempt to lift their spirits, Fogg suggested attending a local circus performance. The colorful tents and excited chatter of the crowd provided a welcome distraction. As they settled into their seats, the ringmaster's booming voice announced the next act. A troupe of talented European acrobats. The performers tumbled and soared through the air with grace and precision, their bodies defying gravity. Suddenly, a familiar figure caught Fogg's eye. There, balanced precariously atop a human pyramid, was none other than Passepartout himself. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Passepartout's gaze locked with Fogg's, a mixture of joy and disbelief etched across his features. Without a second thought, the faithful valet leapt from his perch, somersaulting through the air to land at his master's feet. The reunion was a whirlwind of emotions, relief, happiness, and the urgent need to press on with their journey. As the circus crowd cheered, mistaking the dramatic scene for part of the act, Fogg, Aouda, and Passepartout slipped away into the night. With their party complete once more, they raced to the docks, the thrum of anticipation pulsing through their veins. Fortune favored them yet again as they secured passage on a steamer bound for San Francisco. As the ship pulled away from the harbor, the lights of Yokohama twinkling in the distance, Fogg allowed himself a small smile. The race against time continued, but now with his loyal companions by his side, the impossible seemed within reach. As they stood on the deck, watching the Japanese coastline fade into the darkness, a sense of unease settled over them. The vast Pacific Ocean stretched before them, a seemingly endless expanse of water that held both promise and peril. What challenges awaited them on this next leg of their journey? Would they make it to San Francisco in time to keep their ambitious schedule? The General Grant loomed in the distance, their ticket to the next stage of their adventure. As they prepared to board, Fogg's hand instinctively went to his pocket, checking for his precious timepiece. His eyes widened in alarm. The pocket watch was gone. On November 14th, Phileas Fogg, Aouda, and Passepartout stepped aboard the steamship General Grant. Their trans-Pacific journey to San Francisco was about to commence, marking a pivotal stage in their race around the world. The ship's horn blasted, a deep, resonant sound that echoed through the air, signaling their departure. Passepartout felt the deck vibrate beneath his feet as the engines roared to life. A mixture of relief and excitement coursed through him as he watched the coastline slowly recede. The familiar salty tang of the sea filled his nostrils, a scent that spoke of adventure and possibility. As the General Grant cut through the waves, the vast expanse of the Pacific stretched out before them like an endless blue canvas. Seagulls wheeled overhead, their cries carried away by the brisk ocean breeze. The sun glinted off the water, creating a dazzling display of light that seemed to dance across the surface. Fogg, ever the picture of composure, spent his days on deck. His hawk-like eyes scanned the horizon, sextant in hand, as he made precise calculations. To the casual observer, he might have seemed as impassive as the brass instruments he used, but there was a subtle tension in the set of his shoulders, a testament to the weight of the wager that drove their journey. Another day, another degree, Fogg muttered to himself, jotting down figures in his notebook. Aouda found herself increasingly drawn to Fogg's quiet strength. She would often join him on deck, ostensibly to take in the sea air, but increasingly to study the man who had become her unexpected protector. In the way he meticulously cared for his instruments, she saw not coldness, but a deep respect for precision. "Mr. Fogg," she ventured one afternoon, "do you find the sea as calming as I do?" Fogg looked up from his calculations, his eyes softening almost imperceptibly. "Indeed, Miss Aouda, there's a certain predictability to it that I find most agreeable." As the days melted into one another, Aouda's feelings for Fogg deepened. She found herself anticipating their daily encounters, cherishing the moments when his guard seemed to lower, revealing glimpses of the man beneath the methodical exterior. Passepartout, meanwhile, threw himself into his duties with renewed vigor. He flitted about the ship like a busy honeybee, ensuring that Fogg's and Aouda's needs were met before they could even voice them. In the evenings, he would entertain his fellow passengers with impressive feats of acrobatics, his lithe body twisting and turning in ways that seemed to defy gravity. "Monsieur Passepartout, encore!" The crowd would cheer, their laughter and applause a welcome distraction from the monotony of endless sea and sky. But not everyone on board shared in the growing camaraderie. Detective Fix paced the decks like a caged tiger, his anxiety mounting with each nautical mile that brought them closer to American shores. The knowledge that he could not make an arrest outside of British territory gnawed at him, souring his mood and sharpening his gaze whenever it fell upon the unsuspecting Fogg. "Soon?" Fix muttered to himself, his fingers twitching with anticipation. "Soon I'll have you, Fogg." As the journey progressed, the ship became a world unto itself. The passengers fell into routines, their days marked by meals in the dining salon, promenades on the deck, and evenings filled with conversation and card games. But beneath the surface of this floating society, currents of tension and anticipation swirled. For Fogg and his companions, each sunset was both a blessing and a curse. It meant they were one day closer to their destination, but also one day less in their race against time. The ticking of Fogg's pocket watch seemed to grow louder with each passing hour, a constant reminder of the challenge that lay ahead. The Pacific, true to its name, remained largely calm throughout their voyage. But as they approached the final week of their crossing, storm clouds began to gather on the horizon. The air grew heavy with the promise of rain, and the sea took on a steely gray hue. It was as if nature itself was conspiring to test their resolve in these crucial final days. "Looks like we're in for some rough weather," Passepartout observed, his usual cheerfulness tinged with concern. Fogg merely nodded, his eyes fixed on the darkening sky. "We shall persevere, Passepartout. We always do." As San Francisco loomed ever closer, a palpable sense of anticipation settled over Fogg, Aouda, and Passepartout. They began to prepare for the next phase of their journey, acutely aware that every moment would count in their race against time. The bustling port city represented both an end and a beginning, the conclusion of their ocean voyage, but merely a waypoint in their grand circumnavigation of the globe. With land finally in sight, Fogg's calculations became even more frequent and intense. Aouda's glances lingered longer on his stoic profile. Passepartout's acrobatics took on an extra flare of excitement, and Fix, his frustration barely contained, readied himself for the moment when he could finally spring his trap. As the General Grant approached the Golden Gate, a sudden gust of wind whipped across the deck, nearly knocking Passepartout off his feet. The ship lurched, and Fogg's precious sextant slipped from his grasp, teetering on the edge of the railing. No, Fogg exclaimed, lunging for the instrument. But as his fingers closed around it, he lost his balance, tipping precariously over the side of the ship. Aouda's heart leapt into her throat as she watched Fogg teeter on the brink, the churning waters below seeming to reach up hungrily towards him. Would their journey end here, mere miles from their destination? Fogg's party arrived in San Francisco on December 3rd. They were 7 hours behind schedule, their journey buffeted by strong headwinds that caused an unexpected delay in their precisely timed adventure. The salty tang of the Pacific hit them as they stepped off the ship, a sharp contrast to the endless blue they'd left behind. San Francisco bustled around them, a chaotic symphony of shouts, clanging bells, and the creaking of ships' masts. Phileas Fogg, his face an impassive mask, scanned the crowded docks with laser focus. His mind whirred like a finely tuned clock, already plotting their next move. Passepartout, ever the curious soul, couldn't help but gawk at the colorful tapestry of humanity before him. Gold Rush prospectors with wild beards rubbed shoulders with elegantly dressed businessmen. Chinese immigrants in traditional garb haggled with rough-and-tumble sailors. The valet's eyes sparkled with excitement, drinking in every detail of this new world. Aouda, their unexpected companion, stayed close to Fogg. Her dark eyes were wide with wonder, but there was a hint of apprehension in the way she clutched her shawl tightly around her shoulders. This bustling American port was a far cry from the quiet streets of her native India. "We must make haste," Fogg announced, his voice calm but brooking no argument. "The transcontinental railroad awaits." They wove through the crowded streets, the scent of fresh-baked sourdough mingling with less savory odors. Fogg's stride never faltered, even as they navigated past a raucous group of sailors spilling out of a tavern. Passepartout couldn't help but admire his master's unwavering focus, a lighthouse of calm in the storm of their race against time. At the train station, Fogg secured their tickets with his usual efficiency. As they waited on the platform, the air suddenly crackled with tension. A political rally had spilled onto the street, two factions facing off with clenched fists and raised voices. Passepartout, unable to resist, edged closer to the commotion. The shouts grew louder, faces red with passion and anger. Suddenly, a fist flew through the air, narrowly missing the valet's nose. His heart raced, a potent mixture of fear and exhilaration coursing through his veins. This was the unpredictable nature of their journey, laid bare in one heart-stopping moment. As night fell, they boarded the train. The rhythmic chugging of the engine and the gentle swaying of the carriage lulled them into a false sense of security. Outside the window, the landscape transformed like a living painting. The towering Sierra Nevada mountains loomed, their snow-capped peaks piercing the inky sky. Aouda gasped softly at the sight, her eyes reflecting the moonlight on the snow. The mountains gave way to vast prairies, an ocean of grass swaying hypnotically in the wind. Fogg sat ramrod straight, his eyes fixed on some distant point. His mind never stopped calculating, each passing minute another tick against their precious time. Frontier towns flashed by, snapshots of a world caught between the old and the new. Cowboys tipped their hats as the iron horse thundered past, a grudging nod to progress. In these moments, the enormity of their journey truly hit home. They were witnessing the shrinking of the world, 1 mile of track at a time. At a stop in Omaha, the air thick with coal smoke and the bustle of passengers, Detective Fix finally revealed himself to Passepartout. The detective's eyes gleamed with a fervent light as he laid out his suspicions about Fogg's involvement in a bank robbery. Passepartout's blood boiled, loyalty overriding his usual good nature. "You dare accuse Monsieur Fogg?" he sputtered, his accent thickening with anger. Before he could think better of it, his fists were flying, connecting with Fix's jaw in a satisfying thud. The encounter left Passepartout shaken, torn between protecting his master and the weight of this new secret. As the train pulled away from Omaha, he stared out the window, his reflection a stranger to him in the darkness. The journey became a battle against the elements. Harsh winter storms battered the train, wind howling like a pack of hungry wolves around the metal carriages. Mechanical problems plagued their progress, each delay feeling like a personal affront to their mission. Through it all, Fogg remained a pillar of tranquility, His unwavering confidence in the face of adversity was like a balm to Aouda and Passepartout's frayed nerves. Aouda found herself drawn to this quiet strength, her admiration growing with each challenge they overcame together. As they entered the eastern United States, the landscape shifted once more. Cities grew larger, the air thicker with the acrid smoke of industry. The urgency of their quest hung over them like a heavy cloud. Each tick of Fogg's pocket watch a reminder of the precious time slipping through their fingers. Passepartout's nerves were frayed to breaking point. Every delay, every unexpected obstacle felt like a personal attack on their mission. He found himself jumping at shadows, convinced that Detective Fix was lurking around every corner, waiting to derail their journey. As night fell on December 7th, the train thundered across the vast plains of Nebraska. The rhythmic clacking of wheels against iron tracks should have been soothing, but Passepartout couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. He glanced at Fogg, hoping to draw strength from his master's unwavering calm. But for the first time since their journey began, he thought he saw a flicker of doubt cross Fogg's face. Suddenly, a bone-chilling screech of metal on metal pierced the night. The train lurched violently, throwing passengers from their seats. Passepartout's heart leapt into his throat as he realized their race against time might be coming to an abrupt and disastrous end. The train thundered across the vast plains of Nebraska on December 7th. Its wheels clacked rhythmically against the iron tracks, lulling passengers into a false sense of security. The endless sea of grass swayed in the wind, golden under the afternoon sun. Inside the train, Phileas Fogg sat rigid in his seat, his eyes fixed on his pocket watch. The steady tick-tock echoed the train's rhythm, a constant reminder of his race against time. Suddenly, a bone-chilling war cry shattered the monotony. Fogg's head snapped up, his heart leaping into his throat. Outside, the peaceful prairie had transformed into a battlefield. A band of Sioux warriors materialized from the tall grass, their faces streaked with war paint, feathers dancing in their hair. At their head rode Chief Aranera, his eyes blazing with fierce determination. The train screeched to a halt, metal grinding against metal in a deafening screech. Panic erupted like wildfire. Passengers scrambled for safety, their screams mixing with the warriors' battle cries. In the chaos, Fogg watched helplessly as Passepartout and several others were dragged from the train, kicking and shouting. For a moment, Fogg stood frozen, his usually unflappable demeanor cracking. The sight of his loyal servant disappearing into the sea of warriors ignited something within him. His fists clenched, jaws set with determination. He would not abandon Passepartout. With a swiftness that surprised even himself, Fogg began organizing a rescue party. His voice, usually so measured, now rang out with authority. "Gentlemen, we must act quickly," he shouted above the din. An American named Mudge stepped forward, his weathered face etched with resolve. "I know these lands," he said gruffly. "I'll guide you." As night fell, Fogg led his makeshift team into Sioux territory. The once monotonous plains now seemed alive with danger. Every rustle of grass sent shivers down their spines. The moon cast long shadows, each one potentially hiding a warrior ready to strike. Fogg's mind raced, calculating their odds, planning their next move. He had always relied on schedules and timetables, but now he found himself navigating by instinct and raw courage. They crept toward the Sioux camp, guided by flickering firelight. Fogg's heart pounded so loudly he feared it would give them away. With silent gestures, he coordinated their approach. The moment stretched like an eternity as they waited for the right moment to strike. Then chaos erupted once more. Fogg and his team surged forward, freeing Passepartout and the others in a flurry of action. The night air filled with shouts and the clash of weapons. Fogg's blood roared in his ears as he fought his way through the fray. Suddenly, he found himself face to face with a Sioux warrior. Time seemed to slow. The warrior's tomahawk glinted menacingly in the moonlight. Fogg, the gentleman who had never so much as raised his voice, now moved with a grace and power he never knew he possessed. He ducked and weaved, his fists connecting with solid blows until the warrior fell. Breathless and battered, they finally reached the train. But their relief was short-lived. The damage to the locomotive was extensive, rendering it useless. Fogg's stomach dropped as he watched precious seconds slip away. It was then that Mudge approached with a wild solution. A sail sledge. Fogg's eyes widened at the sight of the wind-powered vehicle. A spark of hope ignited in his chest. Without hesitation, he purchased the contraption, his usual frugality forgotten in the face of necessity. As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Fogg, Aouda, and Passepartout boarded the sail sledge. The wind caught the sail and they began to glide across the snow-covered landscape. Fogg's grip on the controls was firm, his gaze fixed eastward. In his eyes burned a determination that would not be extinguished. The damaged train and the night's harrowing events faded behind them. Ahead lay an endless expanse of white, beautiful yet treacherous. As they picked up speed, the wind whipping at their faces, a new challenge loomed before them. The snow-covered American plains stretched endlessly, a daunting task that seemed impossible to conquer. Yet Fogg's resolve remained unshaken. The race against time continued, with every second more precious than the last. The snow-covered American plains stretched endlessly before them, a treacherous expanse that seemed to go on forever. Phileas Fogg and his companions faced the daunting task of conquering this unforgiving landscape as they pressed on with their journey. The biting wind howled across the barren terrain, whipping up flurries of snow that stung their faces and obscured their vision. Each step was a battle against nature itself, their feet sinking into the deep drifts as they trudged forward. The silence of the plains was oppressive, broken only by the crunch of snow beneath their feet and the occasional whistle of wind through barren trees. After what felt like an eternity of struggle, the group finally reached Omaha on December 10th. Exhaustion etched deep lines on their faces, but a spark of determination still burned in their eyes. The sight of civilization after days in the wilderness was like a balm to their weary souls. Relief washed over them as they boarded the train to Chicago. The rhythmic clacking of wheels on rails was a welcome symphony after the harsh silence of the plains. As the landscape blurred past their windows, Fogg sat perfectly still, his face a mask of calm. In contrast, Passepartout fidgeted in his seat, his nervous energy palpable. "We're making good time, aren't we, Monsieur Fogg?" Passepartout asked, his voice tinged with hope. Fogg merely nodded, his eyes never leaving the window. The stakes were too high for complacency. In Chicago, they swiftly transferred to another train bound for New York. The cityscape rushed by in a dizzying kaleidoscope of lights and shadows. As they neared their destination, tension filled the air like an electric current. The train pulled into New York City on December 11th at 11:15 a.m. The platform was a chaos of noise and movement. But to Fogg and his companions, time seemed to slow to a crawl. Every second was precious, every minute a potential setback. They rushed to the harbor, hope and dread warring in their hearts. The salty air hit them like a wall as they emerged onto the docks. Ships of all sizes bobbed gently in the water, a forest of masts stretching as far as the eye could see. But as they scanned the docks, searching for their salvation, a crushing realization dawned. The China, their intended steamship to Liverpool, had departed just 45 minutes earlier. The news hit them like a physical blow, threatening to shatter their dreams of circumnavigating the globe in 80 days. Passepartout's shoulders slumped, his usual cheerfulness evaporating like mist in the morning sun. "Mon Dieu," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the harbor's bustle. Fix, the detective, couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction, quickly masked by feigned sympathy. "What a shame," he murmured, his eyes darting to Fogg's impassive face. Aouda, ever observant, watched Fogg closely, marveling at his composure in the face of such a setback. Her heart ached for him, even as admiration swelled within her. Fogg, however, refused to admit defeat. His eyes, usually calm pools of blue, now blazed with determination. He strode purposefully along the docks, scrutinizing every vessel, his mind working furiously to find a solution. As if answering an unspoken prayer, Fogg's gaze fell upon a small trading ship named the Henrietta. Its weathered hull spoke of countless voyages, each plank a testament to battles won against the sea. Captain Andrew Speedy stood on deck, his weather-beaten face creased with lines of experience. Fogg approached him, his offer of a substantial sum to take them to Liverpool hanging in the salty air between them. Speedy's refusal was swift and firm. "Can't do it," he growled. "We're bound for Bordeaux with a full cargo." But Fogg was not deterred. His voice, steady and resolute, cut through the harbor noise as he made an even more audacious proposal. "I offer to buy your ship, Captain. $60,000 for the Henrietta, on the condition that you and your crew agree to sail us to Liverpool instead." The harbor seemed to hold its breath as Speedy considered the offer. His crew gathered around, eyes wide with disbelief and barely concealed excitement. The sum Fogg proposed was a fortune, a chance to change their lives in an instant. After what felt like an eternity, Speedy nodded, a slow grin spreading across his weathered face. "You've got yourself a deal, Mr. Fogg," he said, his voice gruff but tinged with admiration for Fogg's boldness. As preparations for departure began, Fogg's companions watched in awe as he effortlessly navigated this latest obstacle, turning what seemed like certain failure into a chance at victory. The sun was setting on December 12th as the group boarded the Henrietta. The ship creaked and groaned, as if aware of the momentous journey it was about to undertake. As they cast off, leaving the familiar shores behind, Fogg stood at the rail, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The final and most uncertain leg of their journey across the Atlantic Ocean lay ahead, a vast expanse of water separating them from their goal. But with every nautical mile, they were one step closer to proving that the impossible was, perhaps, possible after all. As darkness fell and the lights of New York faded into the distance, an ominous chill settled over the ship. The Henrietta plunged into the inky blackness of the open ocean, the wind picking up strength with each passing moment. Fogg's companions exchanged worried glances as the first drops of icy rain began to fall, heralding the storm that lay ahead. Little did they know that their true test was only just beginning. The Henrietta set sail from New York on December 12th, its hull cutting through the icy waters of the Atlantic. The ship's departure marked the beginning of a perilous journey, with the crew bracing themselves against the harsh winter seas. As the vessel plowed through the choppy waters, the salt-laden air stung the faces of those on deck. Captain Speedy, a man whose resolve seemed to ebb and flow like the tides, retreated to his cabin. The weight of his decision to embark on this voyage pressed upon him like a physical force, driving him to seek solace in the cramped confines of his quarters. Into this void stepped Phileas Fogg, a man as unshakable as a mountain. His calm demeanor stood in stark contrast to the roiling seas and howling winds that battered the Henrietta. With quiet confidence, he assumed command, his extensive nautical knowledge surprising the seasoned crew. "Steady as she goes, men," Fogg's voice carried over the wind, a beacon of reassurance in the chaos of the storm. The sailors found themselves drawn to his unwavering presence, their own fears receding in the face of his composure. Days blurred together in a haze of salt spray and rolling waves. The rhythmic creaking of the ship's timbers became a constant companion, punctuated by the occasional shout of a sailor or the crash of a particularly large wave. On December 16th, however, a different sound cut through the usual cacophony, the worried voice of the ship's engineer. "Mr. Fogg," he said, his face etched with concern, "our fuel supplies are dangerously low. We may not make it to Liverpool at this rate." A lesser man might have faltered, but Fogg's mind whirred like the gears of a finely tuned clock. His eyes, fixed on the horizon, betrayed no hint of doubt as he formulated a plan that bordered on the absurd. "Gentlemen," he addressed the crew, his voice steady against the backdrop of creaking timber and crashing waves, "I propose we use the very ship itself as our fuel." Bewildered glances were exchanged, but Fogg's unwavering gaze and the promise of generous compensation swayed them. Soon the Henrietta began to transform. Like a tree shedding its leaves in autumn, the ship gradually shed its wooden components. The acrid smell of burning wood mingled with the salty sea air as masts, deck structures, and interior fittings were systematically dismantled and fed to the hungry boilers. The emotional toll of their desperate measures weighed heavily on the crew. Some watched with a mixture of awe and dismay as their floating home was sacrificed piece by piece. Others found a grim sort of humor in their predicament. "At this rate," one sailor quipped, "we'll be burning our own boots next." Through it all, Fogg remained a pillar of calm determination. His resolve served to bolster the spirits of his companions, particularly Aouda and Passepartout, who watched him with a mixture of admiration and concern. On December 21st, with Liverpool finally within sight, Fogg made his final move. In a transaction that seemed to defy all logic, he purchased the remaining hull from Captain Speedy, who had emerged from his cabin a changed man, humbled by Fogg's indomitable spirit. As the clock struck 11:40 a.m., the Henrietta, or what was left of her, docked in Liverpool. The journey had taken its toll on the vessel, but the human spirit aboard remained unbroken. Fogg, Aouda, and Passepartout disembarked, their hearts light with the promise of victory. London and the successful completion of their extraordinary wager was just hours away. But fate, it seemed, had one last cruel trick to play. As they stepped onto solid ground for the first time in days, a figure emerged from the bustling crowd. Detective Fix, who had shadowed their journey across the globe, finally made his move. With a heavy heart but a determined set to his jaw, he approached Fogg. "Phileas Fogg," Fix announced, his voice carrying a mix of triumph and regret. "I arrest you in the name of the Queen. You are charged with robbing the Bank of England." The words fell like a thunderbolt, shattering the moment of near victory. Fogg, who had faced every challenge with unflappable calm, found himself confronted with an obstacle he couldn't have foreseen. As the reality of his situation sank in, the clock continued its relentless march forward, indifferent to the human drama unfolding on the Liverpool docks. Fogg's mind raced, calculating the precious minutes slipping away. As Detective Fix's firm grip closed around his arm, he caught a glimpse of a nearby clock tower. The hands seemed to mock him, ticking away the seconds of his carefully planned journey. With a sinking feeling in his stomach, Fogg realized that his greatest challenge yet lay not across oceans or continents, but in the very place he had fought so hard to reach. Would this unexpected turn of events be the one that finally defeated the undefeatable Phileas Fogg? Detective Fix swiftly escorted Phileas Fogg to the custom house in Liverpool. The moment Fogg stepped inside, he felt the weight of his arrest threatening to crush his chances of winning the wager. The imposing stone building loomed over Fogg, its shadow seeming to stretch endlessly, much like the journey that had brought him to this point. The air inside was thick with the musty scent of old papers and the acrid tang of ink, a stark contrast to the salty sea breeze that had accompanied their arrival in port. Time, once Fogg's steadfast ally, now seemed to mock him. The ticking of the clock on the wall grew louder with each passing second, each tick a hammer blow to his hopes. Precious minutes slipped away like sand through an hourglass, and Fogg could almost feel them brushing against his skin as they fell. Outside, Aouda and Passepartout stood frozen in disbelief. Ouda's eyes glistened with unshed tears, her hands clasped tightly together as if in prayer. Passepartout's usually cheerful demeanor had crumbled into a mask of despair, his shoulders slumped under the weight of their predicament. Inside, Fogg maintained his composure, but his mind raced. He calculated the dwindling odds of his success, each sum more disheartening than the last. The bustling sounds of the custom house faded into the background, replaced by the thunderous beating of his own heart. Just as hope began to fade like the setting sun, fate intervened. A telegram arrived from London, its message a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. The real bank robber had been apprehended in Edinburgh. The words on the paper were a key, unlocking Fogg's chains and setting him free. But freedom came at a cost. Precious hours had been lost, time that could not be reclaimed. Fogg, Aouda, and Passepartout burst out of the custom house like racehorses from their starting gates. Their feet pounded the cobblestone streets as they rushed towards the train station, their breaths coming in short, sharp gasps. The cool air stung their faces as they ran, a physical reminder of the urgency of their situation. The station clock showed 2:03 p.m. as they boarded the train to London. Less than 7 hours remained to reach the Reform Club. As the train lurched forward, the landscape outside became a blur of green and gray, mirroring the whirlwind of emotions inside the carriage. Fogg, usually a picture of calm, now sat rigid in his seat. His eyes darted between his pocket watch and the passing scenery, as if willing the train to move faster through sheer force of will. The gentle sway of the carriage did nothing to soothe his nerves, each movement a reminder of the precious seconds ticking away. Aouda reached out and placed her hand on his, a silent gesture of support that spoke volumes. The warmth of her touch seemed to anchor Fogg, providing a moment of stillness in the storm of his thoughts. Passepartout, unable to contain his nervous energy, paced the narrow aisle like a caged tiger. His muttered calculations of time and distance filled the air, a constant reminder of the challenge that lay ahead. The rhythmic clacking of the train wheels seemed to echo his frantic thoughts. Detective Fix, consumed by guilt for nearly derailing Fogg's journey, approached the group. His face, once set with determination to arrest Fogg, now bore the lines of remorse. "Mr. Fogg," he began hesitantly, his voice barely audible over the train's rumble, "I want to help you make up for lost time. What if we used a sail sledge from Liverpool to London?" Fogg considered the offer for a moment, his mind weighing the risks and potential rewards. But in the end, he shook his head. "We'll stick with the train, Mr. Fix. It's gotten us this far." His voice was steady, but there was a hint of steel beneath the calm exterior. As the train hurtled towards London, the tension in the carriage grew thick enough to cut with a knife. Every clickety-clack of the wheels on the track was a countdown. Every whistle of the engine a reminder of the ticking clock. The passing landscape became a blur, much like the whirlwind journey that had brought them to this point. The train pulled into the London station at 8:50 p.m., 5 agonizing minutes past the deadline. But Fogg and his companions were not ready to concede defeat. They burst out of the train like a cork from a champagne bottle, their feet barely touching the ground as they raced through the streets of London. The city was a maze of gas-lit streets and shadowy alleys. The cool night air filled their lungs as they ran, the sound of their footsteps echoing off the buildings. Passers-by turned to stare at the strange sight of 4 people running as if their lives depended on it. The Reform Club loomed ahead, a beacon of hope in the gathering darkness. Its grand facade seemed to mock them, the warm glow from its windows a stark contrast to the chill that had settled in their hearts. Fogg's extraordinary journey, a tale of determination and friendship that had spanned the globe, now came down to these final moments. As they approached the club's grand entrance, the outcome of their incredible adventure hung in the balance, as delicate and unpredictable as a leaf caught in a gust of wind. Fogg's hand reached for the door handle, his fingers trembling slightly. The world seemed to hold its breath as he pushed the door open, stepping into the warmth of the club. The clock began to chime, each resonant toll like a hammer blow to their hopes. Fogg's eyes darted to the nearest timepiece, his heart pounding in his chest. Had they made it in time, or had their incredible journey been in vain? The clock struck 8:50 p.m. on December 21st. Phileas Fogg arrived at the Reform Club, believing he had lost the wager by 5 minutes. London's chill air nipped at Fogg's face as he stood before the imposing facade of the Reform Club. The city's usual bustle had quieted, as if holding its breath in anticipation of his return. Fogg's heart raced beneath his impeccable waistcoat, but his face remained a mask of calm. The grand oak doors swung open with a soft creak, revealing Fogg's tall figure. Conversation died instantly as all eyes turned to him. Despite his apparent defeat, Fogg's stride was steady, his chin held high. The plush carpets muffled his footsteps, creating an eerie silence as he approached his fellow club members. "Gentlemen," Fogg addressed them, his voice as smooth as aged whiskey, "I have completed my journey around the world." He paused, the weight of his next words hanging in the air. "However, I regret to inform you that I have missed the deadline." A collective gasp rippled through the room like a stone dropped in a still pond. The disappointment was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. With the dignity of a captain going down with his ship, Fogg accepted his loss. He turned on his heel, his coattails swishing softly, and made his way back to the waiting carriage where Aouda and Passepartout anxiously awaited. The ride home was silent, each lost in their own thoughts. London's streets, usually alive with the clatter of hooves and the chatter of pedestrians, seemed muted, as if the city itself mourned Fogg's defeat. At his residence, a grand townhouse that now felt as empty as a desert, Fogg retreated to his study. The scratch of pen on paper filled the room as he meticulously calculated his losses. Each figure was a stark reminder of the price of his ambition, etching lines of worry on his usually impassive face. Meanwhile, Aouda paced the drawing room, her heart a tumult of emotions. Her silk gown rustled with each step, a soft counterpoint to the ticking of the ornate clock on the mantel. Throughout their whirlwind adventure, She had fallen deeply in love with the enigmatic Englishman. His unwavering resolve, his quiet strength, and his hidden kindness had captured her heart as surely as if it were a delicate butterfly in a collector's net. Taking a deep breath that seemed to draw all the air from the room, she steeled herself and entered Fogg's study. The warm glow of the gas lamps cast long shadows across the room, highlighting the tired lines on Fogg's face. "Mr. Fogg," she began, her voice trembling like a leaf in the wind, "I have something I must say." Fogg looked up, his eyebrows raised in curiosity, and Aouda's courage wavered for a moment, but she pressed on, her words tumbling out like water from a broken dam. "Our journey together has been extraordinary, and I have come to care for you deeply. Would you consider marrying me?" For a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, like ice melting in the spring sun, Fogg's usual stoic expression softened. A smile, rare and genuine, spread across his face, transforming him entirely. "My dear Aouda," he said, his voice warm with emotion, "nothing would make me happier." Joy bubbled up inside Aouda like champagne, effervescent and intoxicating. They began to plan their wedding for the very next day, their excitement a stark contrast to the gloom that had pervaded the house mere moments ago. Fogg called for Passepartout, his faithful valet who had been more companion than servant on their global adventure. "Passepartout, please inform Reverend Samuel Wilson of our intent to marry tomorrow." Passepartout, his face alight with happiness for his master, dashed off into the night like a shooting star. The minutes ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity, until finally the door burst open with a bang that seemed to shake the very foundations of the house. Passepartout stood there, panting, his eyes wild with excitement. "Master," he exclaimed, his French accent thicker than usual in his agitation, "we have arrived a day early." The room fell silent as the implications of this news sank in. In their eastward journey around the globe, they had crossed the international date line, gaining a precious day without realizing it. Fogg's eyes widened, a fire igniting within them. With the precision of a military commander, he sprang into action. "Quick! We must return to the Reform Club!" The streets of London became a blur as their carriage raced through the night, the horses' hooves striking sparks from the cobblestones. Time seemed to stretch and compress, playing tricks on their senses as they neared their destination. The great clock of the Reform Club loomed before them, its hands creeping ever closer to 8:45 p.m. Fogg leapt from the carriage before it had fully stopped, his usual composure replaced by urgent purpose. He burst through the doors of the club, his appearance causing a commotion among the gathered members. All eyes turned to the clock as Fogg strode across the room, each step bringing him closer to victory or defeat. The second hand ticked relentlessly onward. 3, 2, 1. "Gentlemen," Fogg announced, his voice ringing out clear and triumphant, "I have won the wager." The clock struck 8:45 p.m. on Saturday, December 21st, and Phileas Fogg stood before them, having completed his journey around the world in exactly 80 days. The club erupted in cheers and congratulations, the sound swelling like a tidal wave. Fogg had not only won his wager, but had doubled his fortune in the process. Yet as he stood there, basking in his triumph, he realized that the greatest prize was not the money, but the love he had found in Aouda and the friendships he had forged along the way. In that moment, Phileas Fogg, once known for his rigid routines, found himself transformed. He had not only circled the globe, but had also opened his heart to the world's wonders and the joy of human connection. As he shared his winnings with the loyal Passepartout and even the repentant Detective Fix, Fogg knew that his greatest journey was just beginning. The London fog outside seemed to lift, revealing a world of endless possibilities. Fogg took Aouda's hand in his, their fingers intertwining like the threads of their shared future. Together, they stepped out into the night, ready to embark on the greatest adventure of all, a life shared in love and companionship.
This book was generated using Speakter's AI voices. You can create human-like voiceovers in over 50 languages.